Welcome to your Civil Engineer Organization Roles and Responsibilities lesson. Sometimes it feels like there are so many people doing so many different things that pertain to what we do every day. So let's take a few minutes to talk about what the major business process owners are in the CE enterprise that apply to asset management and try to understand this whole installation and mission support center construct. By the end of this lesson, hopefully you have an idea as to who owns what pertaining to what you do every day. Whether you're an operations manager and you work in Tririga a lot, or you're a sub-activity manager and you work in sustainment management systems a lot, or you're working in data analysis, you should have a good idea of who owns these different programs and these different processes in the CE enterprise. The objectives of this lesson are to understand the CE functional structure, to understand the role of the Air Force Installation and Mission Support Center and the Air Force Civil Engineer Center in base level operations, and then finally to recall the CE enterprise business owners for applicable asset management processes. As I said in the last slide, it's important for us to understand who owns, for the Air Force, the things that we do every day. So without further ado, let's dive right in. The big picture is that we as civil engineers don't have one chain of command. We have three. The first chain of command is our regular chain of command. This is the one we're all familiar with. This chain of command links every airman, whether enlisted, officer, or civil service employee, at every organization to the very top. As we all know, the higher we get in the chain of command, the more rank is involved, and with rank comes responsibility. The chain of command is how we are organized, trained, and equipped as airmen across the Air Force, not necessarily just as engineers. At its lowest level, each flight consists of elements, which make up a subfunction of a greater squadron, which makes up a mission support group, which makes a wing, and so on and so forth, up to Headquarters Air Force. But that's not it. Beside this reporting chain of command is a functional chain, one that ties CE functions at the flight and squadron level with a numbered Air Force and a MAGCOM engineer function. For example, the engineer functions in Air Force Global Strike Command may differ from those within Air Combat Command. Less a chain of command and more a chain of function, this chain aligns the CE functions to the operational mission of the MAGCOM or numbered Air Force. This functional chain climbs all the way to the top, where at the Headquarters Air Force level, we have the Air Force Director of Civil Engineers, and at the Secretary of the Air Force level, we have the Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Air Force for Installations, Environment, and Logistics. Depending on how long you've been an engineer, in your mind, this functional chain might nest neatly into the reporting chain of command. As engineers, we have a third chain of command, which is arguably the most important to understand and also the most complex, our chain of resources. It looks simple, but the Air Force Civil Engineer Center represents a part of our chain of resources where not only money flows, but also policy is implemented and support to the civil engineer enterprise is provided. You can see dotted lines connecting the CE flights and squadron to AFCEC, which then connects to various functional chains of command all the way to the top. This is because AFCEC exists to provide responsive, flexible, full-spectrum installation engineering services. AFCEC is one of many parts of the Air Force Installation and Mission Support Center, which reports to the Air Force Materiel Command. You can see lines that link to MAGCOM, A4C, and SAF-IE. That's because the money that keeps the CE enterprise alive no longer flows down the functional chain of command. It flows through the Air Force Installation and Mission Support Center chain of resources. Now let's dive into what AFIMSC is, where it came from, and what it does. If we go back to 2013, in the Department of Defense, we were living in a world of constrained resources, challenged by leadership to work smarter and more efficiently. This was the time when the Air Force was reeling from large reductions in its workforce at the lowest organizational levels. While there were cuts in the squadrons, there weren't as many cuts in the higher headquarters levels. This resulted in too much overhead for the amount of manpower in the squadrons. Coming all the way from the top, the Secretary of Defense at the time implored all of us to get creative with how we manage common, day-to-day support and expeditionary support functions, which could reduce overhead. From this imperative, the Air Force Installation and Mission Support Center was born. As an example of the way things were before Air Force Installation and Mission Support Center, here you see three different types of bases. At the left, you have a depot base within AFMC. In the middle, you have a joint base, and on the right, you have a traditional flying mission base. Regardless of what the mission of the base was, you had functional support at several MAGCOMs doing ostensibly the same task. The selected way ahead was to centralize or combine headquarters staff support for installations and mission support, or INMS, at a single intermediate level headquarters. This would effectively standardize several installation support functions and greatly reduce overhead. It wasn't as simple as just cutting MAGCOM staffs, however. Further analysis was needed to ensure that the capabilities required for MAGCOM-specific support remained at the MAGCOM, and the development of an intermediate headquarters didn't overlook the fact that sometimes you just need someone on the ground in a specific location to accomplish a certain task. On the left, you see PACAF as an example. There exists a requirement for PACAF engineers to facilitate interactions with the host nation. In contrast to that, the contracting functions are fairly consistent across MAGCOMs, no matter where you are in the Air Force. So that responsibility was transferred to the Air Force Installation and Mission Support Detachment. Finally, there are some functions that are simply universal across the Air Force and can be executed via reachback support. These functions were transferred to AFIMSC headquarters or the functional center within AFIMSC. These various capabilities were grouped together, and in 2014, a capabilities library was developed to support the formation of the Air Force Installation and Mission Support Center. The Air Force Installation and Mission Support Center was provisionally established at Joint Base Andrews in August of 2014. Program Action Directive, or PAD 1404, is the guiding document that formed AFIMSC as the single intermediate level headquarters for centralized management of installation and mission support. AFIMSC would also program and budget all requirements against installation and mission support, establish and monitor compliance with levels of service standards such as AFCOLS, and finally integrate MAGCOM priorities based on Air Force needs. AFIMSC is similar in nature to the centralized organizations in the Navy and the Army, known as NAVFAC and IMCOM respectively. The key difference is that mission support personnel and their organizations fall outside of the operational chain of command in those services, while in our service, our mission support functions are still a part of the regular operational chain of command. There are three major components to AFIMSC: Headquarters, AFIMSC detachments, and primary subordinate units. Headquarters AFIMSC provides installation and mission support resources through the planning, programming, budgeting, and execution process and analytical support. They also provide clear communications and accountability control over installation and mission support functions. At the MAGCOM level, AFIMSC detachments provide responsive synchronization to the management of AFIMSC assets to address MAGCOM-specific priorities. Finally, the primary subordinate units provide project and program management and subject matter experts and services. This is where AFCEC is located in their organization. This is the organizational chart for the Air Force Materiel Command. You can see here that there are 6 different centers that align under AFMC: the Air Force Research Laboratory, the Air Force Lifecycle Management Center, the Air Force Installation and Mission Support Center, the Air Force Nuclear Weapons Center, the Air Force Sustainment Center, and the Air Force Test Center. You can see that the Air Force Installation and Mission Support Center is highlighted because that's the one we're going to go into today. Here we see the organizational chart for the Air Force Installation and Mission Support Center. Commanded by a 2-star general, you can see that AFIMSC headquarters is broken between special staff, resources, installation support, and expeditionary support, along with the primary subordinate units, which is where AFCEC falls under. The red boxes on this organizational chart denote where engineers are in this organization. Here we dive deeper into the organizational chart under AFIMSC. These are all the primary subordinate units that fall under it: the Air Force Civil Engineers Center, the Air Force Financial Services Center, the Air Force Installation Contracting Agency, the Air Force Security Forces Center, the Air Force Financial Management Center of Expertise, and finally, the Air Force Services Activity. Let's dive deeper into the Air Force Civil Engineers Center. With the implementation of Program Action Directive 1404, AFCEC, now aligned under AFIMSC, it would provide civil engineer project and program management along with subject matter experts and services to the field. In the past, the MAGCOMs would have been the first place for base-level engineers to seek support for technical expertise. Now, AFCEC is the primary provider of external support for CE squadrons. They have technical experts in almost all areas of CE interest. AFCEC is geographically split between Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio and Tyndall Air Force Base in Florida. Memorizing the organizational chart here is less important than understanding that AFCEC will be your central point of contact for external support for almost all areas of CE. We've gone ahead and highlighted the two directorates which will most apply to you as an asset manager in our enterprise, the Operations Directorate and the Planning and Integration Directorate. Let's explore these two in greater detail. AFCEC's Operations Directorate, or CO, provides direct technical, managerial, and training expertise to the Air Force civil engineer community with emphasis on operations and maintenance of the built environment. This is where ops folks should look for help with asset visibility and airfield pavement evaluation support, operations maintenance, force development and career field management, engineering subject matter experts, and finally, the civil engineer maintenance, inspection, and repair team. The Asset Visibility Division of the Operations Directorate provides 5 main capabilities: worldwide pavement evaluations, enterprise sub-AMP management, infrastructure assessment and validation, energy audits, and sustainment management system program management. Now, if you're a sub-AMP manager taking this course, this is where you'll find your enterprise-wide sub-activity manager. These individuals can provide you help in system focus activity management. They can also provide you input to data standards and requirements for your system. And finally, if you have a large project going the Air Force Comprehensive Asset Management Plan, they can help take a look at the data and help validate those projects for you. This is also where you'll find your builder expert, your paver expert, your fueler expert, and utilities experts for the Air Force. So if you have questions on those programs, this is where you go to. The Operations Maintenance Division of the Operations Directorate provides full spectrum support to operations engineering elements across the Air Force. They own just about every single business process in operations engineering, from work management, to preventive maintenance, to material control, service contracts, cost accounting, and vehicles. Furthermore, AFCEC COO is the operations functional lead for TRIRIGA. These guys know everything there is to know about how to use TRIRIGA in the operations flight. Over at Joint Base San Antonio, the Activity Integration Division of the Planning and Integration Directorate is focused more on strategic long-term planning. This is where you'll find the business owners for the AFCAMP and AFAMP, and where the business rules and prospectuses are developed. Here's a list of major processes that apply to the base level activity manager and their process owners at AFCEC. Take a few minutes to review this slide and think about what might apply to you in your job right now. So, if you're an operations manager, a majority of the functions that you support fall under AFCEC CO. If you're an activity or sub-activity manager, the functions that you support fall between AFCEC CO and AFCEC CP. So here's a quick overview of the big picture of the roles and responsibilities in the CE enterprise. I know it's complicated, there's a lot going on, but just know that up at Air Staff and the Secretary of the Air Force level, they're really focused on program oversight and advocating for us as engineers down at the base level. They're also in charge of career field management and developing strategy and guidance to get engineers into the future. At AFI-MSC, they focus on programming and budgeting for installation and mission support functions across the Air Force, not just engineers, but force support, security forces, contracting, and more. The Air Force Civil Engineer Center is our one-stop shop for Air Force Civil Engineer project and program management, civil engineer subject matter experts, and also our activity and sub-activity managers for the Air Force. MAGCOMs still focus on mission requirements, identification, and prioritization, and down at the base, you all still plan and identify requirements, perform emergency repairs and condition-based preventive maintenance, and finally, provide agile combat support and/or expeditionary combat support. Here are the big rocks for today's lesson on CE roles and responsibilities. The first thing to remember is that our enterprise is complicated. Not only do we have a chain of command, we also have a functional chain. We also have a chain of resources too. It's important to remember that that chain of resources flows through the Air Force Installation and Mission Support Center, which provides installation and mission support resources through the PPB&E process and analytical support. We also talked about AFCEC, particularly the Operations Directorate and the Planning and Integration Directorate. These folks are the major business owners for asset management processes in the Air Force. Hopefully this lesson was useful to you. I know it can be pretty intimidating with how complicated our organization is, but no matter where you sit in the CE squadron, I hope you were able to find someone who manages your program for the entire enterprise. The main overarching goal for putting this lesson in this course is to show you that there are people who are managing the stuff that you do every day for the entire Air Force enterprise. So, if you find yourself in need for help, you now know what organization is responsible for it. Please provide us some feedback. How'd you like the lesson? What do you think it needs? Until next time.